Reuven, welcome back to Talk Python to me. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to be back here. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you as well. I'm a little concerned though. There's some possibilities that maybe my is it Facebook ads are going to get messed up. We are talking about pandas and pandas internationally, and I heard that you're some kind of animal trafficker.
Oh my
You
god.
want to
Oh my
start the
god.
show with that story? It's out of control.
It is the craziest story. So I occasionally advertise on Facebook, advertise my, pandas and Python training. And I guess it was like 2 years ago, I tried doing a little bit more advertising. And like basically I didn't really pay much attention to it until about a year ago when I noticed that when I tried to do some more advertising and it said, you are not allowed to advertise on any meta properties. I was like, that's really weird. Like, what did I do? I looked, I could not find any indication of what I'd done wrong. So it says, if you want to appeal, click here. So I clicked here. And within 30 minutes or so, I get email back saying, your appeal has been checked and denied. You will never be allowed to advertise on any meta property again. And this was like, what have I done? Like, what in the world? I'm
I
teaching
feel like I'm
Python
pretty
in
innocent. Just some
classes. Nightmare.
courses and some books. Come on, man.
And like, I figured also I appealed. Someone must have looked through this. Anyway, in poking around online, someone said to me, oh, I was caught by the same thing. It is illegal to sell rare and endangered animals. And they believe that since you were selling Python and Pandas training, then you must have been training in live and endangered animals, and thus you are banned for life. Well, I said, you know what? I got some, first of all, like nuts, and yet a great story to tell to my machine learning classes. So good on that front. But I was like, this is easy to resolve, right? I'll just contact someone on Facebook. No one's available. I contact some of my connections, like people I know who work there, and I finally get the answer back saying that for legal purposes, they delete all data that's more than 6 months old, something like that. So they could not go back and check to see why I was banned, and thus this ban really would be for life. So because I waited a while, because it'd been like a year between the ban and me noticing,
Oh
so they
my
couldn't do anything
gosh.
about it. So I was like half laughing and half like, you got to be kidding me about this. And I posted on my blog about this, and you guys picked it up on Python Bytes. It was picked up in a bunch of other places like Hacker News. And about a month later, I checked, and it was back. No one told me anything. No one said anything. Just magically and quietly, my account was restored. So they
Running to
could
the
not
press
take my
never
money again.
helps. That
That's
never
right. That's
helps.
right. But it was so absurd.
No.
And I think it was at least like four senior engineers at Facebook who tried to help me with this. And they were all like, we
Yeah.
tried. There's nothing we can do.
Crazy. It reminds me, honestly, it reminds me so much of my App Store review experience getting the new Talk Python training mobile apps in
All right.
iOS, in the apps, in the iOS App Store and the Google App Store. They were tragically incompetent in their own special way, right? Somewhat malicious, somewhat not malicious. Just like, for example, Apple, I think it was Apple, it could have been, I don't know, Apple or Google, it has to be one of them, said, you know, we've denied your application to publish this application because you're trying to impersonate an existing one. I said, what app am I trying? What am I trying to impersonate? Like it's hundreds of hours of stuff that we've created. Like they're like, well, first you might be hijacking. No. So well, what this is? Well, in the description it says, if you want to learn Python, you can take our courses. Well, there's already an app called Learn Python, and you're
Oh my
trying to
God.
impersonate. I'm like, what? They're like, it said if you want to learn Python, but there's an app called Learn Python. I'm like, I don't even like my mind is. How do you read that description and think this
So
is
if
a
you come up with an
trademark?
app called like Eat at a Restaurant, then
Yeah.
no food order
Oh,
delivery place will be.
yeah, you're gonna be acquired by like Uber Eats straight away. Exactly. And so we went, but you would think, okay, fair mistake. Like, yeah, okay, something caught it. Just like you said, a simple request and a human will look and it'll be fine. No, they're like, well, look, obviously you're doing this. I'm like, obviously, let's try another scenario. What if I said I wanted to learn to play the guitar and there was an app called Learn Guitar, but I don't want to learn. It's not, the title is not Learn Guitar. Just the act of learning a guitar. How else would you explain it? Like, oh, okay. So I guess we understand now. You can have that sentence. And it's just, these things are really, and you're at the at the complete mercy of them. It's really, it's
Right,
both like
right.
comically funny, but it's also like painful because we spent 4 months building that app they wouldn't accept for this stupid reason, you know?
And they're taking a fair amount of money off the top for whatever people are earning from these apps. It's
Yes.
not like this is a charity or something. What I found amazing with Facebook was there was literally no way to contact a human being. Like I tried all sorts of searches and forums and on and on. And like and I found a lot of other people who had been caught up in this sort of ridiculous situation. But like there's no form even to say, hey, I think you made a mistake. Why don't you have a human look at this? Because that would
Yeah.
cost them too much,
Yeah.
someone's salary.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but boy, is that a crazy story. And I mean, we're going to be trading in some pandas today. And so I'm going to bleep that part. Every time the word pandas is said, we're bleeping it out on the YouTube version.
Well, this could be entertaining then.
Wow. Ruben was really testy. Like all those bleeps. What was he saying? No, seriously though. Let's catch up. We'll talk about your book. What have you been up to since the last time we spoke? I can't remember the last time I had you on. It's been a couple of years, I think.
It's been some time, yeah. So I'm continuing to do Python pandas training at companies. Since the pandemic, much more of it is online, just because companies are now used to doing stuff on Zoom, Team, WebEx, rather than bringing me there in person. That's fine. So I travel to conferences rather than to clients, and it sort of extended my flexibility on that. And I've also been building up my online training stuff, both a whole lot of courses, and I've got an online boot camp that I run for Python and Pandas twice a year. The big thing, which is actually connected to what we're doing here also, is I have a new newsletter called Bamboo Weekly, where I have Pandas exercises, sort of like the same style as the book, but every week I take a topic and I do it based on current events. So if there's something going on in the news, I try to find a data set, a real world data set that has something to do with that, and then we try to experiment with that. And
yeah, that sounds really fun. Just see like a real world example every week.
Yeah. So people are like, how do you come up with that? And I say, well, I listen to a lot of podcasts and I read a lot of newspapers, and something somewhere, like I read The Economist, for example, and they had this short, cute article about the number of animals that go through Heathrow Airport every year. I was like, wait, there's got to be a data set for that. And sure enough, the Heathrow Airport Authority publishes a data set in CSV of how many animals go through. And it was like 200 horses and 1.5 billion butterflies and everything in between. And so it was great fun to sort of play with that data and ask questions about it and give people practice with something that's dirty and messy. I don't mean the animals being dirty, right? Like dirty, messy, and like you need to like really wrestle with it, because that's the only way you're going to improve. So I'm having a lot of fun on all the training front. I definitely see more and more use of, I'm sure this won't surprise you, more and more use of Python in the data space as it just like catches fire there.
Yeah, it's just going downhill, picking up speed, isn't it?
It's extraordinary. Like I still remember asking people in my intro Python courses, so what are you here for? They're like, yeah, my company's thinking of doing some stuff with data analysis in Pandas. And or at least does data analysis. I think it was then even in NumPy before Pandas came out. And me thinking, I should really learn this stuff because it sounds like it's going to be popular. And holy cow, it's like it's everywhere. And the whole ecosystem is just growing. So like people are sort of seeing Pandas as the like underlying infrastructure on which they build their software tools and their companies even.
Right. Or even the thing that defines the API on which they can innovate, right? Think Dask or a whole bunch of other things in that space, right? That if you know Pandas, chances are, if you're not too crazy, you can like do grid computing by changing the import.
Extraordinary. Just extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely is. And so back to your newsletter, Pandas Eat Bamboo, is that right?
That's so.
Well, yes. I understand why you're banned from Facebook. Okay.
Right. It was actually my father's idea. I was like, I need a catchy name for something, and so so he was like, well, what was something with bamboo? I was like, right. It's like it's food for thought and food for pandas.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, that's actually really clever. I like it a lot. So you've been on a journey. You've been on a journey to write a book, right?
Yes, I was convinced to do a second one. Right, so I did a book with Manning called Python Workout. which was exercises in Python. And when that finished, they said, so what other topics do you think would be useful? I said, well, doing a lot of pandas, and people definitely need a lot of exercise and a lot of practice in that. And so I got to work both collecting the exercises I do with my corporate training and also like coming up with some new ones as I learn new things, because pandas is so huge that it's very easy to get lost in there and not even know what are the important topics to learn. And so thanks to like working with people all the time, I sort of see also where they get stuck and where they have problems and where it's really confusing to them. So yeah, so 200 and some odd exercises later. By the way, I'll just tell you, why did it come out when it came out? Because I'm terribly bad at deadlines. I said to the Manning people, I really want to have it at my booth at PyCon. They said, okay, big talker. You want it mid-May, huh? So you'd better have everything done. And they sort of backtracked on the calendar and said, okay, so you better have the whole thing done by December. And then finally I had some like, fire under me and got it done as opposed to,
Awesome.
I should get more done.
Yeah, the version I actually have in my Apple Books here I pulled up is the Manning early access preview version, but it's out for real now. Yeah.
Here, I've even got the paper copy here. Woo-hoo!
What?
I
Look at that.
know. It's like
That's a
I
pretty
still
hefty
keep
book,
looking at paper.
honestly. That's a
It's like,
proper book.
I know. It feels like it's really quite some feeling there to see.
Yeah.
I guess I really finished it.
Congratulations. So I wanted to talk to you about maybe just kind of following on with your bamboo idea. Like, give us some examples. Give us some problems that people are solving with pandas. And I mean, we're not going to talk through the code super detailed, but you could say like this aspect or this feature of pandas like .loc or whatever is how you access and solve these problems, right? Like, so just kind of exploring that space. I had Wes McKinney on 4 or 5 episodes ago, something like that. And asked just like, how do you learn pandas? It's like so big,
So I've actually changed. Well, let me first say, I'm definitely one of those people who thinks you should learn Python before pandas. Like, I definitely think that knowing the language well will serve you very, very well in all sorts of weird, small ways necessarily. But at the same time, when you learn pandas, you have to learn that some of the paradigms you learned, like some of the idioms from Python, are not appropriate. So I was giving a class in like optimizing pandas, like a short class, what I call a micro class, like 90 minutes long, about a year or so ago. And at the end, I was like, oh, and by the way, obviously just never do for loops. And everyone's like, wait, what? I said, what do you mean, what? and they were like, we were taught in our intro pandas class that you should do a for loop to do anything across the data frame. And I was like, okay, what? How can this be? And so people think that because it's in Python, you should do it the same way. But there are all these different idioms, especially the whole vectorization, that you need 100%. To internalize. Otherwise, as I like to say to people, you should hope to be paid by the hour because like these things are just going to take forever to run. And so people like don't necessarily understand sort of how to approach Panda stuff. And then they don't understand sort of, let's see, I mean, I'll give like outline and then we can sort of go into it. Certainly how to access things with .loc. Certainly how multi-indexes work. How to work with the different D types. These are things that we don't think about in the standard pandas world each day, right? The closest analogy would maybe be that where you're working with a dictionary, you want to think about what your keys are going to be. But even then, it doesn't come close to it. So like .loc, people are like, so fine. So .loc is used for retrieving from a series or retrieving from a data frame. But it's so much more than that because you have 2 parts to it, or potentially 2 parts. You have the row selector and you have the column selector, and each of those can be an individual name, a list of names, a Boolean series, or even a lambda. And you can mix and match those in so many different ways. And once you see those options, like your head sort of explodes with, oh, wait, I never thought that I could access my data like that. And then you're like, wait, you can also assign your data like that. And then they're just sort of astonished.
Yeah, it's really wild. I think Pandas has its own idiomatic style that is different than what you would call Pythonic, right? Like it's Pandonic. I don't know what the name is. Idiomatic pandas, right? Where there's things that are specific to pandas, like this vectorization stuff, right? Instead of looping over, right? You think about the Python performance angles or the the data science performance angles, right? A lot of the speed that we get out of tools like pandas and NumPy and polars and others is because you take the data, you push it down into some native layer, and you just leave it there, and you kind of speak to the native layer from Python, and you say, deep down in your insides, you got this thing. Multiply all 1 million of them by 2 or whatever, right? But if you
Yeah.
loop over it, you're like converting it out of C into Python objects. Then you're operating out. Then you're putting it back in, like just 2 million times. And all of a sudden, all those benefits are gone. And so, certainly learning those types of things. I mean, the vectorization, I think most people get pretty soon, although it sounds like not necessarily everyone.
I was really
but
flabbergasted.
but there's way more than that, right? There's a whole. That's just probably the most obvious thing.
Right. I mean, so like accessing things in that way. By the way, you asked before, like, how should people even approach learning pandas? And so I've started thinking about it a little differently based on feedback from people, that I would sort of walk through it. Okay, here's a series, here's a data frame. And after creating some, fake ones with, made up numbers or random numbers, then we'll start reading in files. And then we'll do this. And then we'll get to visualization. And a student of mine said, you're sort of missing the big, like people miss the big picture doing that. And they want to get the excitement. Why don't you start with read a CSV file, visualize it right there inside of Jupyter, and then people will be so impressed and amazed, and then you fill in the gaps. And so I've started doing that a bit, and I think that has not been a bad approach to catch their attention, give them a sense of what the possibilities are. I'm like, okay, let's now walk through each of these little pieces and build up to what we saw that first day. And that's been fun.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's also something that I really strive for. I don't always do whenever I'm doing presentations, but just because someone is chosen to sit in a seat for a day-long course or an hour-long presentation doesn't mean that they couldn't use a little inspiration, right? And if you can, like, wow, you did those 3 lines and now we have this picture and I understand all that, like, tell me more, right? That right there.
That's right.
Now you have their actual attention the whole time and they're enjoying it, and it's so often there's like, well, in order to show you the nice stuff, I got to give you every level of detail. It's like, no, you don't. You're gonna make them leave. Don't do it that way.
That's right. And you mentioned like 3 lines of code. One of the amazing things about pandas is how often you can write very, very little code.
Yeah.
But it's like getting to that code that takes a while, really taking advantage of it. So
or even knowing that it's possible, right?
Right. People don't even know. So a lot of times, like, I've been using it now for long enough that I sort of intuit, there's got to be a method that does this. Like someone has encountered this problem before. And so either there's a method or there's an option or there's an add-on, like something somewhere that just makes it trivially easy. And that's part of the exploration that I try to do both in the book, Bamboo Weekly, and like in my training in general. And also, truth be told, I'm constantly learning stuff. Right? Like it's rare for me to teach and not discover some option or some method that I did not know about because it's just so incredibly vast.
Yeah. Or Pandas 2 comes out or something like that.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I've been exploring, tomorrow I head off to Prague for EuroPython, where I'm giving a talk on PyArrow in Pandas. And so I've been looking into that a lot. And oh boy, right? I mean, I've been using it for, say, a year or so, but it's amazing. And yet there are all these subtle changes that are happening in pandas as a result that you need to know about or you need to expect when you use it. But it's another like tool in our toolbox that we can pull out to make pandas more effective, more efficient, deal with larger data, and also interact with and interoperate with other systems. It's just like,
for sure.
As I said, the whole ecosystem is just exploding. It's really quite something to see.
Yeah, it really is. And I think the Pandas 2 stuff is going to make a pretty big difference in changing like the internals away from just, tables of numbers, basically. Okay. Let's talk about, so the way I thought we could maybe explore this Pandas workout book is let's just pick some fun exercises that you put together and talk about them. Like, give us a quick overview of what the workout aspect of this book means anyway. Then we'll pick the first one.
Sure. So the idea is that you can't learn everything all at once or quickly. That's sort of like, working out physically. It's a long haul, and every day you get a little better, a little stronger, a little more flexible. And so if you see, your panda's learning journey as it's going to take me several months, not it's going to take me a day, then if every day you do a little bit of practice, you learn something new in some new direction, at the end of that journey, you're going to be able to solve many, many more problems in better, more idiomatic and more efficient ways. And you'll be able to put these pieces together in ways that you didn't even expect. So that's the basic idea. And so the book is divided into, I want to say 12 chapters. I don't know, we sort of rejiggered it at some point, where each chapter focuses on a different aspect of pandas. But it's really sort of the total experience of going through it. And so we have 200 exercises, plus there's like a, for lack of a better term, a midterm and a final, like
Okay.
meteor projects that people can go through that people asked for after the Python book. And each exercise then has not only the main exercise where I pose a problem, I give an explanation, I give an answer, note the order. The answer comes at the end, so you won't peek as easily. We talked about putting it in the back of the book, and like that just didn't work out so well. So at least you have to wade through the explanation a little bit or turn the page. And then after
You can buy the one book with the questions.
there was
And then
talk
you can
about
buy.
that too.
You can buy. Oh, you serious? Okay, you can buy the
There was
answers later. I was
10 times the
joking.
price.
I didn't mean to give anyone ideas. I'm joking.
No, it's fine. And then like after the answer, we have 3 what we call beyond the exercise, which are, okay, now that you've kind of gotten the basics, let's push either on the same data set or even like sort of go farther. And so it's like, that's why we say it's 200 exercises, because it's 50 official exercises, another 3 for each one. And those tend to be much harder. And I don't give a full explanation, although I do give the solution online in a Jupyter notebook. You can download Jupyter for all these things and see how I solved it. And for many of them, there's a link to the Pandas tutor. I think, yeah, you've definitely spoken to Philip Guo in the past. So he now is not only Python tutor, but Pandas tutor, he and his team. It's amazing. And so you can just click on a link and it will take you to usually a miniature version of the data set, because it's too big for Pandas tutor. And then you can sort of see the visualization, how these things work.
Yeah, I don't think I talked about Pandas Tutor. Maybe I have talked to Philip about it, but I've certainly used it in some of my courses. But it's worth bringing up just to talk, like, to see how that thing works. It's something
amazing.
special, this thing. It really gives you some deep understanding into like, okay, if I run, this group by command, then here's how all the pieces like flow back together. And so you're using this during your book?
So yeah, so I mean, every exercise has a link in the solution. You click on it and it brings you to the code that I used. Usually, again, a sort of miniature version of the code, miniature version of the data set that you can then see the visualization there in your browser.
Nice. Yeah, because you've got to basically, I think, encode the data in the URL or something, so it can't be too much.
Right. So I would like basically take the data in the data frame, turn it into a Python dictionary, and then like set it up, because it won't work with files for security reasons. So assign that dictionary to a variable, or I'm sorry, I turn to CSV in a string, and then assign that string to a variable and read it in, and then I would see if it overflowed the Pandas Pandas tutor limit. And if it did that, I sort of iterated until I got it small enough to fit in there and big enough to be useful and interesting.
Yeah.
That took a few iterations.
It's cool. No, but it's a super, super good resource for learning pandas. I also think for exploring, right? Like you end up with some code that like, I'm not really sure what this does, or this is actually new to me. Like a lot of things you might encounter in this book. You're like, let me visualize that, right? Because
right.
It's great.
I mean, I as I said, like I do a lot of training in pandas, and very often people have already played with it a bit, used it for a year or two. And because it's so large, like it's not unusual for someone to say, oh, I had no idea that this functionality existed. Why have I been wasting my time doing X and Y and Z?
Yeah.
I'll give you one example that I've been using more and more. So Matt Harrison's a big fan of the method chaining approach. And at first I was like, yeah, Matt, whatever. Stop pushing it on everyone. And
you and your fluent interfaces. Keep it to yourself.
And then I was like, actually, this is a great way to build things up little by little, line by line. And I can use this. It's pedagogically very useful, because I say, okay, let's think about how we want to break down this problem. We'll do this, then we'll do this, then we'll do this. And you can see it sort of going line by line until voila, we have the analysis that we want. And so I inserted that into a lot of places in the book. Sort of like one of the last edits that I did was to go back and change it to be more method chainy, and I use it now all the time in my training and in Bamboo Weekly. And I bow to Matt on that. He was right, and I was stubbornly resistant for no good reason.
Yeah, I really like that style as well. You see, it's officially night here where I am. It's just everything switched up.
Yeah, I just had that yesterday when it like I was doing office hours, and all of a sudden, like I was sharing my screen and it changed the color. So I'm glad I'm not the only one it happens
Yeah,
to.
it's funny. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the method chaining fluent interfaces. I mean, I would love to even see like Python itself in the standard library adopt that more, right? Like there's so many things you operate on that'll change something, but then it'll return none. Not return anything. It's like a void method as much as we have those, right? It returns none effectively. So you can't say, dot sort, dot this, dot that. You have to like multi-step it, and I would just love to see more of it. But let's talk.
Well, I'll just say there on that front. So Pandas does have the option to either get back a new data frame or to say in place equals true, and then it does it locally, like it does it on that data structure and then returns none. And people are consistently convinced that this is faster, more efficient, better. And so I've been trying to tell people, no, the Python core developers keep saying, do not think that is true. It is not true. And we are getting rid of in place equals true at some point. Stop using it so that you can do method chaining. And so no small number of people, again, in my course, they're like, oh, really? I had no idea. So I feel like, I'm spreading the gospel, as it were.
Beautiful. Throw that whole expression in some parentheses and just dot yourself away. Let's go. All right.
That's right.
Let's dot our way on over to exercise 7 of the many, and let's just talk about long, medium, and short taxi rides. Tell us, we can only talk so much about the code, but let's talk a bit about it and give people. Like I said, I want to expose people to what are some of the problems and aspects of pandas that you can use to solve them.
Sure. So one of my favorite data sets to work with is New York City taxi information. It's like everyone can identify with it, you understand it. And so this exercise uses a very small subset of that. Maybe we'll talk next about the pandemic taxis, which is a much larger one. But this is just 10,000 taxi rides from 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And the question is, well, how can we divide up this data set, which tells us how long, how far, how much people paid, when they were picked up, all that information. How can we find out the distance that they went and categorize that? And the reason that this can be useful is we so often have numeric data that we need to put into categories, right? What are best sellers? What are poor sellers? Who are, the most, employee of the year, that sort of thing. There's so many places where turning something into a category will be useful. And so it's very tempting to think, okay, I'll do some if statements or I'll do some for statements. But actually, Pandas provides us with pd.cut, which just does it for us. And this is one of those examples of once you learn it, you're like, oh, wow, I get it. I don't have to have, I even have here, you might think you would want to say, let's set all the categories, to be medium. And then where it's less than 2 miles, we'll call it short. And where it's greater than 10 miles, we'll call it long. But you can just say pd.cut. We're going to cut at 2. We're going to cut at 10. Anything less than 2 is short. Anything greater than 10 is long. Anything in the middle is medium. Done. And pd.cut gives you back a new series.
So the way you're doing it is you're setting everything to medium, and then you're defining short and you're defining long instead of defining the 3 categories.
So that's the sort of, you might think this would be a good way to do it. And it works, right? As I like to say in my courses, unfortunately, this works. Right? So you will get the right answer this way. But if you then go to the next page here, you'll see that you can just use pd.cut. See. And then you just say, here are the bins, here are the labels, go. And
this goes back to that thing we talked about, looping over stuff versus just going, this is what I want you to do. Do it 100% deep down inside, the best you can. Don't bother me. Just figure it out for me.
That's exactly right. And this means that a whole lot of people have worked on pd.cut and have made it work efficiently way more efficiently than you or I could do in our code. Presumably, right? It's not going to be any worse, and it'll probably be a lot better. The other thing is you get back, and you can see it sorted at the end, what the output of the series you get here. So you feed it a series, and you get back a series. And the series looks at first glance like it's a bunch of strings. And so you're going to have short, 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 medium, medium, long, long, long. But it's actually not strings. It's actually a category, which is a pandas version of an enum. So really, it's very small because it's just integers being stored there. And then those integers are associated with strings. So that's an example of like where they have thought through it. And they've basically said, yeah, we're going to make this more efficient than you would probably think to do on your own.
Right. Awesome. Well, I would, to be honest, I've been happy if I came up with that first solution. Just using lock instead of in there. That's pretty cool. But this cuts is super nice. Yeah. Just define the boundaries as bins, and then
right,
off it goes.
Right. And there's an option there, include lowest. And so I actually didn't know about this for a while. So I'd be like, okay, so think about it. The bins has to be from some small number to some large number. And the question is then, well, wait a second, what about that leftmost bin? What about that? Like if it's up to and not including, it's like less than, but not less than equal, then how do I do it? So I would always be like, well, I'll take the min. I'll do like the series.min -1. And then it's guaranteed to be lower than that. But no, it turns out the Pandas developers thought about this long before I did. And there's an option, a keyword argument you can pass, include lowest equals true. Done. Now it's less than and equal as opposed to just less than.
Right. Because all these kind of things, the boundary conditions are always tricky, especially on floating points, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
There's probably at least 2 spacecrafts that have crashed because of this. All right. The next one we want to go to is number 12. Finding outliers.
Yeah. So, this is not a book about statistics, and I'm not an expert in statistics, but there are a whole lot of statistical ideas that permeate working with pandas. And so it's like, mean, standard deviation, median, understanding sort of how they can differ from one another, right? And especially the whole mean versus median thing, where it's so easy to have a few outliers pull your data up or pull your data down and then sort of fool you.
Right.
And so often people want to find the opposite. And I've certainly found this, especially with our corporate training with like cybersecurity people, where they're like, we are always looking for outliers. Like, who was the user who was logging in at unusual times?
Right.
And so
who logged in from 20 IP addresses within 1 minute?
That's right.
That's not a good person. They're not good. I'm to tell you just that right now.
They're just trying to be very, very effective.
Multitasking.
And so this finding outliers is okay. Let's find out then not who was sort of normal, but like who was abnormal, right? Who was exhibiting, unusual behavior. And so here it's like, okay, let's take our set of numbers and let's find out who was more than 1 standard deviation. Can't remember if it's 1 or 2 above the mean or below the mean. And let's just find those values and ignore the sort of normal values. And then we could talk a little about, IQR, the interquartile range, which is a standard statistical idea that we don't talk about enough, even though it's super useful, right? People came up with these ideas a long time ago. Oh, here's a fun fact. John Tukey, who came up with a lot of these ideas, he also invented the word bit in computers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, yeah, I was like, wow, what a guy. So you can see here then that, like, I'm going to take the, trip distance. Let's find, trip distance. Let's find where the trip distance is less than the trip distance at the first quartile minus 1.5 times the IQR, right? Meaning, let's take the distance between the first quartile and the third quartile. That's our interquartile range. That gives us a sense of like where are the bulk of the numbers, and let's find out who is below that or who is above that. And so it's not surprising that if we're looking for taxi distances, you're not going to have a lot of outliers that are very low because you can't go below 0 miles in your taxi. But you can go very high. You can go very large. And so looking for those trips that are greater than the 75th percentile plus 1.5 times the IQR, we actually find, I see here in front of me, about 1,800 taxi rides out of the 10,000. So about 19% of the taxi rides are much, much longer than the mean ride.
Interesting.
And you can use this, then you can imagine people in like the New York City Taxi Limousine Commission saying, oh, we can use this to plan, to charge, to, send taxis in different places.
Sure. Or
Or
have
if
a
you're
special
Uber,
program for long distance stuff or
right,
whatever. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Or if you're Uber, you know where to place. Because they actually used to have the longitude and latitude of where people were picked up and dropped off. And they got rid of that. And I'm sure both for privacy reasons and because Uber and Lyft can look at that data and say, oh, well, we know now when to send cars where. And then,
Well,
like,
although while true, I imagine that data has been downloaded and archived with geolocation
oh, yeah. Oh,
for certain
still
people,
get,
right?
you
Yeah.
can still get all that old data. It's just the newer stuff that they don't
The
do it.
newer
And they
stuff
still do it by
doesn't. Okay.
neighborhood. I
I
also
see.
wonder, like, how precise that longitude and latitude was. Like, you could probably identify which home, like, was going to which other home. And I can only
Yeah.
imagine
Now
how
you're
bad
getting
that would
into a
look.
problem. Yeah. Now you're getting into a shady spot, or certain types of establishments, that could be fraught with consequences for the people whose home you've already identified where they were picked up at, or all sorts of stuff, right?
Exactly.
All right, fair. Fair. That's way more important than whether Uber can place their vehicles strategically,
Right. And they might have some data on their own too,
Nice. Okay, so you can use this IQR, interquartile range feature, to pull that out here, right?
Right. And we can pull that out and then do simple multiplication. Right. At the end of the day, what we're doing is we're pulling out this data and then just doing very, very simple statistical analysis of it. Just to sort of say, how many outliers do we have? How many low outliers? How many high outliers? And you can see that's like, at the end of the day, it's not that complicated in terms of math. Sometimes people are like, well, how much math do I have to know to learn this stuff? I'm like, I can get through it. I promise you. Not that much. It's not that hard. A few basic ideas and you're basically set.
Yeah, very cool. All right, on to the next one, which is pandemic taxis. That's a different kind of taxi.
So this was actually the two studies we looked at so far were with my tiny little 10,000 taxi ride sample from a few years ago. I then took taxi rides from January and July of 2019 and 2020, so 4 months there. And the question was, I think I actually only looked at July in this exercise. Yeah, July 2019, July 2020, comparing taxi rides. Now, just to remind you, July 2020, not a great time for tourism in New York City or anywhere else. And so the question was,
No.
what differences do we see between July 2019 and July 2020? How much did it go down in terms of taxi use? How much less did people pay? And then my favorite part of this was, did people use cash more in 2020 or less in 2020? And so you see, first of all, it's like a decline of something like 80% in terms of taxi rides from 2019 to 2020. Again, not a huge surprise to anyone who lived through the pandemic and like saw what was going on then. And so my gut feeling was, well, no one wanted to touch anyone else or touch anything that anyone else had touched. So clearly people would have used credit cards much more. And no, it turns out they used cash.
But there's that
more.
screen, Ruben. You got to touch the
Oh.
okay. That drove me crazy during the pandemic. It's like, I'm going to just do touchless. And then you like sign it or you okay. You're like,
I never
Come
thought of that.
on.
I guess in Israel, like you just like, would do the tapping of your card. You didn't have to sign anything, but
Yeah, the US, they're like, oh, hit okay to confirm. It's like, okay, I thought we had just escaped me touching this disease-ridden thing, but no.
Also, you have to like indicate how much of a tip you want to leave, but that's a whole separate.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we're at the I don't know, the car wash. Don't you want to tip the car? No, I don't want to tip the car wash. That's the other thing is you should have looked at tips. Like that could have been interesting, actually.
I think. Oh, I did. I think no. I think I did. I've definitely looked at tips, but I can't remember what it was like then.
Like around the pandemic, yeah, because I know a lot of people gave tips to like kind of say thanks, and I was
Very
wondering if that would show up, like thanks for being out here amongst the diseased ones,
So it turns out that people used cash more during the pandemic than credit.
Okay.
And I like raised this with my family. And I was like, what the heck? I think it was my sister who said, well, everyone who would use, like the people who were sort of higher income earners who use their credit cards more, they were staying home. It's the people who like were forced to go to work who use cash more, who were taking the taxis because they didn't want to take the subway. Like there was like a sort of an in-between sort of thing. So you
Okay,
get all these
interesting.
like
Yeah.
wild pieces of data and analysis that you can do. And here
Yeah.
it was not just like
Yeah.
pulling all of this data, but one of the big things was also I want to read in a lot of data. I want to read in from 2 different CSV files. Now what do I do? Right? Because it's very obvious. You read in a CSV file, you get a data frame. You read another CSV file, you get a data frame. But I want to treat those as one. And I want to then be able to distinguish between them. How do I do that? And so, sure enough, Pandas has a concat method. And I use concat now all the time. I read in multiple CSV files into multiple data frames. I can cat them together, and you can cat them either horizontally or vertically, depending on what you like, sort of what you want to do. And this comes back to
I
what I
see.
said
If they're
before
like
about how
their columns are the same, then you might do it
that's
vertically.
right.
But if you want to augment it potentially, because like, oh, now we have the sale percentage data, but it goes along with the columns exactly, or the rows
Precisely,
exactly. Yeah.
precisely.
Okay, got it.
And so another like a nice way to do this also is not just read this one and read that one, but you can use a list comprehension with something like glob, right? So glob.glob on star.csv, get back a list of data frames and then just hand that to pd.concat. And so that's where knowing Python and be able to pull that out and use those techniques can really, really come in handy.
Yeah. Earlier you mentioned, I want to go back to it real quick. You mentioned that learn
Yeah.
Python first and then pandas. A lot of times when I think learn Python, I think, okay, well, learn the language and then learn the standard library to a good degree, and then begin to chop away at the 500,000 things on PyPI that are interesting, and it's like a never ending sort of thing. And then there's, of course, this joke, like I learned Python, it was a good weekend or something like that. Right.
Right.
Like, how do you square these two things? But I feel like the amount of Python that you need to learn is mostly centered around the language and really is actually not that much. And then you kind of
Yes.
learn the pandas way, right? Theoretically, if
So
you wanted to.
right, for sure. Look, I'm a big fan of objects and classes and all that stuff. But when I'm talking to people who specifically want to use Python for data analytics with pandas, I say to them, objects will help you, but they're not going to be crucial. Like if there's a part of the course that you want to sort of drop to save some money, save some time, then that's a place where we can save because the odds of an analyst using pandas writing their own classes are pretty slim. I think it'll give them some perspective on how these classes work. But I don't
Sure.
think that like they need to learn that. So and like a lot of the standard library there, it's hard to say, right? So as I said, I love glob, right? Globbing is fantastic. But that's definitely not in like my intro class. I'm not going to say, oh,
I
by the
would
way.
bet, yeah, I would bet there's probably 10 modules that if you knew, you might not need to learn more for 6 months, doing
Yes,
Jupyter Pandas type of work, right? Like pathlib and a couple of things like that, right?
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I just made up
Yeah.
that number, but
It's mostly like just being able to sort of work with the core data structures, understanding the syntax and how it works, and even like defining some simple functions, right? I think most people using pandas are not at the end going to define functions. Although, as I've gone on with my use of pandas, I see, Lambda, this is where it's at. Like knowing how to use it really, really helps. So there, I do sort of go back with the pandas people. I'm like, okay, this is going to be super weird. We're going to talk about anonymous functions now. And then like I typically do that with the more advanced pandas groups, not with the like introductory ones. But if you can sort of wrap your mind around that, then it does help quite a bit.
it does. So it takes what would be multiple step things and it lets you turn it into one of those chained expressions because instead of defining a function somewhere else, you can just put it in line as part of a lambda and just keep on going.
That's right.
Great.
And the fact that so it's especially useful, I find. So we mentioned .lock earlier. So .lock allows you to choose rows. Let's start with that. And so I can pass it a lambda, and that lambda then gets the data frame you're working on as an argument. And then whatever it returns, if it returns a Boolean series, then it allows you to filter. Well, you can then have multiple .locks and multiple lambdas in a row to do successive filtering. And yes, that is less efficient than doing it all in one fell swoop. But boy, oh boy, it's easier to think about and it's easier to use. So you just like whittle it down, whittle it down, whittle it down, each line with its own lambda. And so understanding how to do that, understanding why it's important that the lambda, inside the lambda, you're using the temporary parameter from the lambda as opposed to the overall variable for your data frame because you're chaining
Yeah.
it, that's useful as well.
Well, 100%. And then you can also like comment out certain lines at the end and see what the
Yes.
intermediate values are. And so you say it's less efficient. It's less computationally efficient. It might be more efficient as a human being trying to understand what the heck is happening, right?
That is spot on. I often tell people that I think Python is a language for an age in which computers are cheap and people are expensive.
Yes.
Because like right, our efficiency is the big bottleneck in terms of time, in terms of money. So right, if it takes my computer a few seconds more, who the heck cares? And
Right.
if I
My
find
M2
that
Pro
seconds
doesn't care if it's like a tiny bit more. I don't care.
That's right. That's right.
Or my just cluster of GPUs, take your pick. Although at that point it starts to cost real money to burn those things,
Right, but still quite. I mean, depending. Look, if you see that your computation is taking a long time, okay, so then you sort of find that and you improve that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like a lot of things are, don't worry about that until it's actually going to become a problem. It looks
Right.
slow. Turns out it's probably a blink of an eye. All right, let's keep moving on. We're getting short on time and we have a plethora of things to work with. I kind of want to go to wine words.
Wine words. Oh,
Wine words. All right. Let me remember what exercise that is. That is 37. All right.
Yeah. So people think of pandas, not wrongly, as being great at working with numbers. But it turns out that it's fantastic at working with two other kinds of data types. One is strings, and one is dates and times. And you can get a ton out of analysis working with these if you know how to work with it. So there is, I forget where it is. Like there's a machine learning like archive of data sets, and one of them is 150,000 wine reviews from Wine Magazine. And
Oh,
so
wow.
I said,
Is
okay,
it Kaggle maybe, or is it somewhere else?
I think Kaggle has a version of it, but I think it's elsewhere. Let me see if I can.
Wine
Like,
Mag, 150,000 reviews. Okay.
I
Beautiful.
don't know. I'll find out where it is. Anyway,
No
so
worries.
I said, okay, let's find out, right? Because you drink a bottle of wine and you read the back and you sort of like roll your eyes at what they've written. Although I put in a plug, I read this fantastic book a few years ago called Cork Dork by this journalist who decided to become a sommelier, and she took the exam, and her journey toward there, she was like, and she convinced me these words actually have real meaning and people are very serious about it. So I will not roll my eyes quite as much anymore. But
I'm getting
my thought
hints
was,
of nutmeg, but they're troubling.
yes, yes.
They don't
So the
belong.
question was, okay, what about these reviews of wine? What words are people using? And are they using certain words more with California wines and certain words more with French wines, or certain words more with red or with white or rosé? And so we can then take this text, break it apart, and search for it. And we can search for it using plain old Panda stuff. We can search for it using regular expressions, which it has built in and works very well. So let's see. So analysis on the words. Here, so one of them are, what are the 10 most common words for red wines? Right. So how do we do that? Well, we have to take the description and break it apart. And if you're used to using just plain old Python, you're like, oh, well, I guess I'll break that into a list. But now what? Now I have a series of lists. Now what do I do? And so one of the key methods to know here is something called explode. And explode is, let's take a series of lists and turn that into a very, very, very long series. And so basically each element in the list becomes an element in the series, and they all share an index. So you know where they're originally from. And then, the world's your oyster. So you can get rid of punctuation, right? So I have a s.stir lower. Okay, so we lowercase everything. Then .stir split, and we split into a list. Then we say explode, get into a long series. Then we once again run strip, getting rid of punctuation. And now we can use isin, which is yet another fantastic pandas method to say, are these words in, like, find the wines where these words are located, and then we can just do a value counts. Definitely my favorite method. How often does this thing show up? And then we use head. Ta-da! We've got the 10 most common 10 most common words there. And when you break it
Because
down
the
like
most
that,
common the counts value count sorts probably most common to least common, right?
yeah, exactly. So value counts, not only does it count how often something shows up, but exactly it sorts it from most
Yeah.
common to least common. So then you
So
just
then
use
head
head
is
to top
the
off.
yeah. If you want however much you take there, and then that's the ones. Those are the popular ones.
That's right. That's right. So here I have like, on the page we're looking at, so we get find where the country is France. So that's the row selector. And we want the column selector to be description. So we only want the description. And then we have our function, top 10 words, which did what I just described. We're going to take these common wine words, lowercase them, get rid of the punctuation, and so forth, pass it in, and we get back our top words. And we find out what words are used to, are associated with French wines as opposed to California wines, and so on and so forth.
Excellent. Yeah, very, very cool example. All right, I think we got time for two more to go through. You want to pick two that are popular? Or you want to leave it up
Uh,
to me?
let's see. Let's do maybe 32 multi-city actually. Yeah. Oh, you know what? No, actually, let's do best
Multi-city
tippers.
temperatures?
You know what? Let's do
Best
best
tippers. All
tippers.
right.
Yeah, you mentioned tipping before,
You're
so
gonna
let's
you're
do
gonna
it.
open up a whole this is gonna be a whole thing. Best tippers, number 42. Let's go.
No judgment here, folks. All right. So the question is like, so we'll try to understand as I read here when people tip their taxi drivers more generously. All right. So the question was, did they tip better? And we looked at 2019 before the pandemic in January and July. So do they tip more in the winter or do they tip more in the summer? And so this involves several things. First of all, it involved using dates and times. Again, one of these things that Pandas is just amazing at, that people just are not aware of all the flexibility you have there. Another thing is how easy it is to create a new column, right? So we spoke before a bit how you can use broadcasting to just multiply. Like I have a column multiplied by something, or a column adding to another column, but you can create a new column just by assigning to it. Again, it's sort of like assigning to a dictionary. It just then is there. And so you can calculate the percentage that people tip, put that in a new column, and then say, well, let's now group by the month and let's find out what
Take
percentage
the
people
mean or
group
the
by.
max or the some sort of
Exactly,
deviation or some kind of
exactly.
yeah, okay.
And we can find out, like, whether people tipped more on average in January or in July. I honestly don't remember what the answer is, which will hopefully not tick off too many readers. Here we go. Let's see what it said. Oh, here we go. Go back one page there. So 32% of taxi riders in New York don't tip at all. That's right. That was a surprising thing to me. And then I don't remember exactly what it was in the different months.
Yeah. And you're talking summer versus winter. There's probably a tourism angle versus non-locals versus tourists. I mean, I know people go to New York and not in the summer, but not as much, I imagine.
That's right. That's right. Like, there are
It's a
all
little
these
colder there.
different factors that like come into it.
Yeah, one of the things, kind of takeaways I'm feeling as we were talking about all these is like there's a lot of interesting questions that can be asked and answered really quickly for like sociology and urban planning and all kinds of interesting questions that don't feel like programmer questions.
Yes. So I mean, I talked to a lot of people, you probably do too, who are like interested in advancing their careers with Python. And they're like, well, I don't have a computer science background. Can I get a job as a programmer? And their vision of a programmer is either someone working at a startup or at like one of the big companies, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and so forth. And I say to them, look, there are an awful lot of people who have great jobs working at supermarket chains and insurance companies in the back room analyzing data, and they are crucial, but we don't think of them as programmers. And in governments and in cities and weather forecasting, like everyone nowadays is using data and collecting and analyzing it, and having these skills either gives you abilities to do your job better or gives you the ability to move into a new job that you couldn't have done before, that these places are desperately looking to fill.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I totally agree. I can't remember which episode it was. I didn't name it right. So there's an episode I did quite a while ago about R programmers and R data scientists and Python data scientists working together, and I think it was the research arm of Kroger maybe that had like 200 data scientists. Like
Wow.
that's a proper group of data scientists. I mean, a lot of times data scientists, I feel like there's a couple of them for a company compared to a software team or something.
No, these and I tell people also, you don't like it's worth learning to write and it's worth learning to speak, not because you're going to be like, a Pulitzer Prize winning writer, not because you're going to be like, whatever prize you would get for like speaking well, just because having these skills makes you more effective at your job. And people who can write a program to suck up some data, analyze it, and come back with a result, especially if it's like a public data set that has something to do with what they're working on, they are so much more valuable to their company than they would have been otherwise.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I found it because I have a
Oh,
search
excellent.
engine on Talk Python that searches the transcripts and
Woohoo!
on top of everything else. If you want to know something, people, about historical shows, when you hit search, it's not just like the show notes. So scaling data science across Python and R, episode 236, with Ethan Swan, Bradley Bokme, and the company is 84.51 degrees. So anyway,
Oh,
that's
oh, I've seen their name before or their
yeah,
number
yeah,
before.
yeah. That's what it was. So people can check that out if they're interested. But
Very, very cool.
yeah, super cool. Okay, last one. What are we doing?
Let's do cities. That's
Cities.
43.
What number is
So,
it?
43.
Okay.
So
Oh, it's right there.
I found a few years ago this JSON file containing the 1,000 largest cities in the United States. So first of all, like good to work with JSON because people need to know how to work with that kind of data.
Yeah.
Second
Yeah.
of all, okay, let's not look at the numbers so much as let's do some plotting. And so I'm going to like make enemies now. I really cannot handle matplotlib. I find it's like so incredibly powerful. And anytime I want to do even the tiniest thing with it, I have to look up the documentation and remind myself how it works. Maybe it's because I don't use it enough. And so I just use the pandas interface for plotting 95% of the time. Let's call it 90% of the time. The rest of the time I usually use Seaborn. So I said, okay, let's see if we can do some plotting here of these largest cities. So for example, let's see growth in Pennsylvania cities. Like which cities in Pennsylvania, or I'm sorry, like let's see do a bar plot. How many large cities are in each state? Okay, well that's a group by, right? So you have to know how to do grouping. You have to know what you're grouping on and how to use count as opposed to mean, right? That count even exists. But then if I want to see a bar plot where it's sorted from smallest to largest, you got to know how to do sorting. And then we can do a bar plot. So sure enough, you do a dot plot dot bar on your series, kablam, you have a bar plot right there. And you
Yeah,
just
that's
get it
awesome.
and like, it's nicely sorted there.
Quick takeaways.
Yeah,
Holy cow, does California have more big cities than I realized? And where's New York and New Jersey? Like it's way down the line. You think of those as having like pretty megatropolis type places.
that's right.
Massachusetts.
That's right.
I
But it's
mean,
how many
yeah,
cities, right?
yeah.
So right. That's like the fun. So keep going. So like do a bar plot of growth in Pennsylvania. So how are we going to do that? Well, wait a second. If we want to do growth, it's a percentage, but it's written in the JSON as number and then percent sign. That's a string. So we're going to have to get rid of the percent sign, and then we're going to have to change the D type from string to a floating point, and then we can sort it, and then we can graph it.
And so
And
the
so that's
ads
a sort of
type,
cleaning.
changing the D type basically is a deep down inside of pandas parse as an integer operation, right? Rather than looping over and parsing or whatever.
Yeah. Like basically, I mean, it has to do the looping. It's doing the looping there at as I like to say,
In
below sea
C or
level.
whatever. Yeah, below sea level. Yeah, down by the Dead Sea. I see. Okay, got it.
um, and so you see
Salty down
here,
there.
like this bar plot. Now we have a whole bunch of cities that have gone down in size, and a bunch of cities gone up in size. And Pandas is very happy to show the bar plot there. Again sorted so that we see it from the greatest sort of shrinkage to the greatest growth.
Right, with Pittsburgh having the most shrinkage and Allentown having the most growth. I would have not guessed that.
And I would not have either, given that like my sister-in-law and brother-in-law live in Allentown, and they're like, oh, Allentown. Actually, but I think that's a common thing that people think there, even though it seems like a perfectly great place to be.
Yeah, sure. Funny. Awesome.
Um,
Well, there's a lot of
well,
cool
one
takeaways from
one
this.
more. Let me just
Yeah,
show you
yeah, go
one.
ahead.
Go to the last one here in this exercise.
Okay, you
So
got it.
one of the most important types of plots you can do in data analysis is a scatter plot. and you take your data frame and you say, give me the plot with based on your, the x axis should be this, and the y axis should be that. Well, if we do a scatter plot based on longitude and latitude of the 1,000 largest US cities, you basically come up with a map of the US.
Yeah, how interesting. The other thing that you realize is California is technically bigger than a lot of other states. So that also counts for why.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
interesting. Well, there's a lot of people in California. It's a good place to be.
There are a lot of people there for sure.
If they're willing to pay the sunshine tax, it's nice there. Cool. All right, Reuven. This is really, really excellent. I know you want to give a shout out to a couple of exercises from Bamboo Weekly, so I'll include those in the show notes as well, and people can like take those and jump over and look at them as well.
That's fine. That's great. Yeah. No, we went through a lot here just during this time. That's
Yeah,
fine.
for sure.
There, as I've discovered, like there's basically, I mean, there's an infinite number of these sorts of things that you can do and different permutations of various sorts. I mean, we didn't even talk about like, multi-indexing, which opens up literally a whole new dimension of this stuff. But it's great fun. It's great fun.
Yeah, and a lot of the Pandas 2 stuff coming on changes the foundation and opens up more possibilities still.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, final thoughts, final call to action. What do we got here? What do you say?
Well, call to action. I mean, you can take a look at like I guess my overall courses and so forth at learnerpython.com, or if you just want to improve your pandas knowledge, you can look at bambooweekly.com, the newsletter there. Even
Does
if you
it
got,
cost
like,
money, or is it just cost an email?
So it is a paid newsletter, but the first 2 questions and answers every week are free. So like it's usually between 5 and 9 questions each week. But even if you don't pay, I still want people to get some pandas learning improvement practice, so they can totally do that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and check out the book, obviously.
Oh yeah, that too. Pandasworkout.com. Ooh, I'll pull this up here. Yay.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty
Awesome.
thick.
Yes, it is.
So I at the end I was like, oh, that's why it took a long time. Also procrastination, but
Yeah.
what it is.
Wow.
But I'd love to hear from
Multiply.
people if they have. I always love to hear like sort of interesting problems, data sets, issues that people are experiencing, just so I can sort of figure out like what are the next directions for me to explore that I can then try to help people with as well.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate all your help coming on the show, sharing your knowledge, and just riffing on pandas together. It was a lot of fun.
Excellent. My great pleasure.
Yeah. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.